Welcome to my channel. Please like, subscribe and share. Why does she always get everything? Why was she picked over me? Am I not as beautiful as her? Says Imani with a loud voice. Once upon a time in the peaceful village of Nyama, located between two towering mountains, life was simple yet beautiful. The villagers relied on the river that snaked through their land, its shimmering waters the lifeblood of their community. Among the villagers, two girls stood out, Imani and Abeni. From the moment they could walk, their bond was unshakable. Imani, with her sharp wit and restless curiosity, often led the way, while Abeni, her quiet and compassionate counterpart, balanced her with calm wisdom. The two were inseparable, whether it was fetching water from the river, sneaking mangoes from the orchard, or looking at the stars at night. However, as they grew older, their paths began to diverge. Abeni's serene beauty and kind demeanor drew the admiration of many, while Imani's cleverness often placed her at the center of problem-solving in the village. Despite their differences, their friendship remained intact, or so it seemed. One fateful day, during the annual river festival, a visitor arrived in Nyama. His name was Omari, the young ruler of a distant kingdom. He carried himself with a grace and authority that turned heads wherever he went. When Omari saw Abeni among the dancers, he was captivated. Her laughter, her movements, even the way her eyes sparkled under the lantern light, everything about her drew him closer. By the end of the night, Omari approached Abeni's family with an offer of marriage. Imani watched the entire scene unfold from the shadows. She smiled and congratulated Abeni as any best friend would, but her heart simmered with emotions she couldn't quite name. Was it envy? Was it betrayal? She pushed the thoughts aside, but the seed had been planted. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of preparation and celebration. Abeni's family, once humble farmers, were now the talk of the village. The villagers helped craft her gown, adorned with pearls that glistened like the river itself. Imani was by her side, arranging flowers, giving advice, and pretending everything was as it always had been. But every time Abeni smiled, her happiness felt like a sharp knife to Imani's chest. On the day of the wedding, Abeni looked radiant, as she was escorted to the grand ceremony. Omari's admiration for her was undeniable, his eyes never leaving her, as they exchanged vows under the ancient baobab tree. The villagers cheered, the drums echoed through the valley, and Imani, standing off to the side, clapped along, her face a mask of joy. As the celebrations stretched into the night, Abeni approached Imani, her hand resting on her friend's shoulder. "You must visit me often," Abeni said, her voice filled with warmth. "I'll need your wisdom in the palace. It won't be the same without you." Imani smiled, but her heart clenched. "Of course," she said. "You'll always be my sister." But deep down, she already knew things would never be the same. Life moved on, but Imani's world felt dimmer. The village that once buzzed with shared adventures now seemed dull. Abeni, now queen of Omari's kingdom, sent letters and occasional gifts, but her presence was absent. Imani tried to immerse herself in her work, helping villagers with disputes and teaching children by the riverbank, but she couldn't shake the hollow feeling inside. Every few weeks, Abeni would visit the village, draped in fine silks and accompanied by royal guards. She would laugh and share stories of the palace, her life full of splendor and love. The villagers adored her, and while Imani smiled and listened, the bitterness in her heart deepened. She hated herself for feeling this way, but couldn't stop. One evening, as Imani sat alone by the river, a dark thought crept into her mind. Why does Abeni have everything? She whispered to herself. The thought lingered, growing roots in her mind. Over time, it became a constant companion, whispering in her ear, urging her to act. Word had long circulated through the village about a reclusive woman who lived deep in the forest. Known only as the sage, she was said to possess knowledge of ancient magic. Desperate souls sometimes sought her out, but her help always came at a cost. Imani had dismissed these tales as superstition, but now, they gnawed at her mind. Under the cover of darkness, Imani set out toward the forest. The path was overgrown, the trees looming like silent sentinels. Strange noises surrounded her, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the snap of twigs underfoot, but she pressed on. Finally, she reached a small hut, its walls covered in moss and its roof barely holding together. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney, and an eerie light glowed from within. Summoning her courage, Imani knocked on the door. It creaked open, revealing an old woman with eyes that seemed to pierce through Imani's soul. "What brings you here, child?" the woman asked, her voice both soft and chilling. Imani hesitated but then said, "I want a better life. My friend has taken everything I deserve. I want her gone." The woman's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Ah, envy is a dangerous fire," she said. "Are you prepared to pay the price?" Imani's hands trembled, but she nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." The old woman turned and began rummaging through her cluttered shelves. After a moment, she held out a small vial of black liquid. "Give this to your friend," she said. "One drop, and she will be transformed into something powerless, something that will no longer stand in your way." Imani took the vial, her heart pounding. "What will she become?" she asked. The woman's grin widened. "A shadow," she replied. "A wandering wisp, unseen and unheard, forever drifting." Imani returned to the village. She hid the vials in the folds of her shawl. Days passed as she wrestled with her conscience, but the whispers in her mind grew louder, urging her to act. Finally, when Abeni visited the village again, Imani saw a chance to carry out her evil plans. "I made something special for you," Imani said, offering Abeni a bowl of soup. "It's for your health and happiness." Abeni smiled warmly, trusting as ever. "Thank you, Imani. You're such a good friend." She ate joyfully, unaware of the trap set for her. Within moments, her body began to shimmer and dissolve, her form unraveling into wisps of smoke. Before Imani's horrified eyes, Abeni transformed into a shadow, barely visible against the sunlight. Imani gasped. She stared at the faint, drifting silhouette of her friend. The shadow lingered for a moment before fading into the wind, leaving only silence behind. "Goodbye, Abeni," Imani whispered, her voice trembling. "The throne will forget you, and I will take my rightful place." The morning after Abeni disappeared, the village awoke to unsettling quiet. Her royal guards, who had accompanied her to the village, searched frantically for any sign of her. Their calls echoed through the narrow paths and along the riverbanks, but there was no response. The only person who knew the truth was Imani, and she kept her silence like a locked chest, unwilling to let even the smallest crack reveal the secret inside. As the days passed, the villagers whispered amongst themselves. How could someone as radiant and kind as Abeni vanish without a trace? The elders convened beneath the baobab tree, deliberating whether the gods had taken her away, or if something more sinister was at play. Meanwhile, Omari, the young king, arrived in the village, his face lined with worry. His presence brought tension, his every step demanding answers that no one could provide. When he questioned Imani, her heart raced, but she met his gaze with a steady calm. "I don't know what happened, my king," she said. "She left my home that evening, and I assumed she had returned to you." Omari's piercing eyes lingered on her for a moment too long, and Imani felt the weight of suspicion in the air. But he said nothing more and turned to the river, staring at its rippling surface, as if it might reveal the truth. Imani tried to move forward with her life, but the memory of Abeni's transformation haunted her. At night, she would wake to the sound of whispers, soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to rise with the wind. Sometimes, she thought she saw flickers of a shadow trailing her, just at the edge of her vision. The old woman's warning rang in her ears, a shadow, forever drifting. Imani told herself it was her imagination, but deep down, she knew the truth. Abeni was still there, a wisp caught between worlds, and she wouldn't be silent forever. One evening, as Imani stood by the river, she felt an icy chill run down her spine. Turning quickly, she saw nothing but the darkened trees swaying in the wind. Still, the feeling of being watched remained. She gripped the edges of her shawl tightly and hurried back to her hut, locking the door behind her. For the first time in her life, the river no longer felt like a place of peace. Back in the palace, Omari's grief grew heavier with each passing day. Abeni's absence left a void that no council or ceremony could fill. At night, he dreamed of her, not as she had been in life, but as a faint, shadowy figure standing by the riverbank. Her voice, distant and hollow, called his name over and over, "Omari, find me." One night, after waking from yet another dream, Omari summoned his closest advisor. "I've seen her," he said, his voice trembling. "She's trapped somewhere. I don't know how, but I feel it. We must search every corner of this kingdom." His advisor hesitated. "My king, the villagers believe she may have left this world. Perhaps the gods took her to the spirit realm." Omari slammed his fist against the table, his eyes blazing. "She's not gone. I will not rest until she is found." From that moment, search parties were dispatched far and wide, their torches illuminating the night, as they combed the land for any trace of the lost queen. But Abeni's shadow, drifting and unseen, remained beyond their reach. The villagers began to notice changes in Imani. Once the vibrant heart of the community, she had grown withdrawn and irritable. She avoided gatherings and spent most of her time alone in her hut. When they approached her, she offered vague excuses about feeling unwell or needing solitude to think. But some weren't convinced. "She's hiding something," one elder murmured to another, as they watched Imani hurry past the marketplace. No one changes so suddenly without reason. Imani felt the weight of their stares wherever she went. She tried to convince herself that it was paranoia, but the whispers grew louder each day. Even the children, who once adored her, seemed hesitant to approach. It was as if the shadow she had unleashed had not only cursed Abeni, but had begun to seep into her own life. One stormy night, as thunder rumbled through the valley, Imani woke to a sharp knock at her door. She froze, her heart racing. No one visited during such late hours, and the ferocity of the storm made the timing even more unsettling. The knock came again, louder this time. Gathering her courage, Imani lit a small lamp and approached the door. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. There was no answer, only the howl of the wind and the drumming of rain on the roof. Slowly, she unlatched the door and opened it just a crack. Standing before her was a figure cloaked in shadows, their face obscured by the night. "Imani," the figure said, their voice barely audible over the storm. "You cannot escape the truth." Before she could respond, a gust of wind extinguished her lamp, plunging the room into darkness. When she relit it moments later, the figure was gone. But on the ground where they had stood lay a single black feather, wet and glistening in the dim light. Imani stared at the feather, her mind racing. Was it a warning? A sign? Whatever it was, she knew one thing: her past was no longer content to remain hidden. As dawn broke over the village, Imani woke up with the memory of the shadowy figure fresh in her mind. The black feather remained on her table, a silent reminder of the night's strange encounter. Her instincts told her that someone, or something, was watching her every move. That day, Imani avoided the river. She stayed within the confines of her small hut, pacing the floor as unease settled over her. Her thoughts circled back to the old woman in the forest. Could the feather be her doing? Was it a warning or a punishment? Imani's chest tightened with the weight of her decisions. By evening, a new rumor began to circulate among the villagers. Someone claimed to have seen a shadow moving along the riverbank, not attached to any person. The whispers reached Imani's ears, and her pulse quickened. It's her, she thought, gripping the edge of her table. She's still here. The night came with a restless silence. Imani sat by her window, staring out into the darkness, the feather clutched in her hand. If Abeni's shadow had lingered, what did it want? And how long before it revealed itself fully? Omari, tormented by his dreams of Abeni, began to seek answers beyond the physical realm. He called upon the kingdom's seer, an elder known for her visions and cryptic prophecies. The seer arrived late one night, her eyes clouded with age but sharp with insight. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing low. "You seek what is hidden in the shadows." Omari nodded. "I see her in my dreams, but I cannot reach her. She calls to me from the river, yet when I wake, she is gone. Tell me what this means." The seer closed her eyes and began to chant softly. The room filled with a strange, heavy energy, as if the air itself were holding its breath. After several moments, she spoke. "A great wrong has been done. The river holds a secret, and its shadow yearns for release. But beware, my king. To uncover the truth, you must walk a path of pain." The seer opened her eyes, locking her gaze with his. "Go to the forest. Seek the one who wields ancient knowledge. Only she can guide you to what you seek." Though her words were riddles, Omari felt a flicker of hope. If the seer spoke true, then Abeni's fate might not be sealed after all. Imani's restless nights continued, and her isolation grew more pronounced. The villagers' gossip turned from pity to suspicion. She could feel their eyes on her as she walked through the market, their quiet conversations halting when she passed. One evening, as she gathered herbs outside her hut, she saw a group of children pointing at her and whispering. When she approached, they scattered, but one small boy dropped a bundle of sticks he had been carrying. Among the sticks was another black feather, identical to the one she had found at her door. Imani stood still, staring at the feather. She knew she couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Clutching the feather tightly, she made her way to the forest under the cover of darkness. The path was familiar, but the air seemed heavier than Befray. She got to the old woman's hut, its crooked silhouette illuminated by the faint glow of a lantern inside. Imani hesitated before knocking, her heart pounding. The door creaked open, and the woman's piercing gaze met hers. "You again," the woman said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Have you come to ask for more?" Imani stepped inside, her hands trembling. "She's still here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her shadow, it's following me." The old woman chuckled darkly. "Did you think such power would come without consequences? Shadows are not so easily banished, child. They cling to the edges of what was lost." Imani's knees weakened, and she sank onto a wooden stool. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice cracking. "How do I stop this?" The old woman leaned in close, her breath smelling of herbs and decay. "You must face her," she said. "Find her at the river. Speak her name. Only then will you know if you are strong enough to endure what comes next." Imani returned to the village, remembering the old woman's words. That night, she couldn't sleep. The whispers in the wind grew louder, and her small hut felt suffocating. Just before dawn, she rose and made her way to the riverbank. The air was crisp, the water glowing under the pale light of the moon. She stood at the edge, her reflection wavering on the surface. For a moment, she thought she saw another figure beside her in the water, but when she turned, she was alone. "Abeni," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know you're here." The wind stilled, and the surface of the river grew eerily calm. Slowly, a shadow began to rise from the water, its form indistinct, but unmistakably human. Imani's breath caught in her throat as the shadow moved closer, its voice soft yet cutting. "Why did you do this to me?" it asked. Imani stumbled back, her knees buckling. I didn't mean," she stammered, but the shadow's presence seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on her like a weight she couldn't escape. "You stole everything from me," the shadow said, "and now you will answer for it." To be continued. Why do you think Imani did this to Abeni? Some friends can really have a dark heart, and allow envy and jealousy to take the best part of them. If you have experienced a friend's betrayal, or knew someone that did, feel free to share in the comment section. Let us learn together. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.